Okay, so before we start talking about continuous graphs and what those domain and range look like, we do need to talk about something called interval notation. And that is just an easy way for us to recognize a range of numbers. The numbers that go from one point to another and include every possible real number in between. The rational numbers, the fractions, those, whatever number you could possibly imagine that go between those points. And so there's a couple of ways that we look at these numbers, okay? So I wanted to give you have this in your notes. It's just a little cheat sheet to help you to kind of visualize these numbers. And so you're going to use, we're just using the letters A and B, but these represent any number, okay? It can be literally any number on a graph. It could be a 0 and a 1, it could be a -4 and a +3, whatever numbers you wanted to choose, okay? What we look at here is we have a graph, all right? And if we were to graph an inequality, and you guys should have done this in the past, but just in case you can't remember, you have an open circle here, okay? And that open circle means that this number, whatever it is not included in the solution to whatever we're talking about, okay? It's not part of what we're talking about. But when we shade in everything in between it, that means that every possible number in between these two numbers is a part of the data that we're talking about, okay? So these two numbers are not part of it, but everything in between them is, okay? And so when we write that as an inequality, you have this number is less than x is less than this number, whatever the two numbers are, okay? And you have the x that's in between it. This is going to help you with your domain. It would be every number in between those, okay? Now, interval notation is a little bit different because it is written similar to an ordered pair, but we use brackets and parentheses to describe whether or not a number is included in that data or not. So in this case, A and B are not included in the data, so we use parentheses. Okay. If you look at B, or number 2, the second example, here B has a colored in circle, and that means that B is part of the data. This number is part of the data that we're looking at. This number is not. And then everything that you can imagine in between those two numbers is also part of the data. And so here, that closed circle, when we do an inequality, is represented by an equal symbol because B, okay, x could be equal to B, whatever this value is. And then when we show that in interval notation, we trade out a parentheses for a bracket, okay? And so that's the difference here. The parentheses are open circles. It means that those numbers are not part of the data. A closed circle is an equals symbol and a bracket. All right, that's what we do here. And so same thing would go for this example, except for the bracket would be on the left side because this is the number that is included, not this one. If both numbers are included in the data, all right, we use equal signs on both of them and we use brackets on both ends, okay? That means that these two numbers and everything in between them could be part of the data that we're looking at. All right, so then we start moving into, well, what if I have a starting point but it goes on forever? Okay, well, here's my starting point, A, all right? A is not included, but everything greater than A is, okay? And so what I end up doing here is whatever my data is, it's greater than A, but A is not included. There's no equal sign, it's an open circle. So when I write this, I go from left to right. A is my left point, it's not included, so I use parentheses, and I'm going to positive infinity, so I use the infinity symbol. And then anytime I use an infinity symbol, I'm going to also use parentheses because infinity is not a specific number. And so I can't say that infinity is included in the data because infinity is not a specific number. It's a range of numbers. It's an infinite number of numbers, okay? All right, so same thing down here, except this time A is part of the data. So everything greater than A, but also equal to A. And so instead of the parentheses for the A, we use a bracket. And then here with the infinite symbol, okay, once we have that infinity symbol, we use a parentheses. So you see how sometimes it's going to be double parentheses, sometimes it's one and then the other, sometimes it's both brackets. It just depends on the data that we're looking at. Okay, so a couple more examples here. On this one, we have this B value, but everything that's less than that. So we're actually moving in the negative infinity this time. So far left is negative infinity, and we go all the way to the B value, but B is not included, so we don't use an equal sign and we use a parentheses. And again, we have an infinity, so we're going to use the parentheses over here as well. And then we look at the number 8 example. Same exact thing, except for this time B is part of the data. That number, whatever it is part of what we're looking at. So we use a bracket and we use an equal sign here. And then here we end up with this that includes every possible real number that you can imagine. There's no starting point. There's no ending point. It's every possible real number. And so in that situation, we go from a negative infinity to a positive infinity. We never use the equal signs because they're in that infinity symbol. We're always going to use parentheses on that. And sometimes you'll see it written as this, which is all real numbers. And it just means the data includes every possible imaginable number that you can see, and we make it with a capital R that's got a second line there. Okay, that's the symbol for all real numbers. So this is your data. This is the cheat sheet that's going to help you with interval notation. Some people like inequality notation better. I don't have a problem if you'd rather use that. There's not an issue with that at all. If you want to draw it on a graph, that's fine as well. To me, interval notation is quicker and it's easier. You have to be familiar with all three of them. So if you're still struggling, I can send you some more information about it and get you kind of settled in on that. And hopefully get some more clarification. But if you're comfortable with those, use whichever one you're most comfortable with. Just know that you got to be able to read all three of those, because on your EOC, they could be written in any form. Okay. A lot of times they do use the interval notation, but sometimes they do use this inequality symbol or the graph. And so just be aware that it's there. And so get help if you need it. I'll be happy to help you with some more examples like this. We can talk about it a little bit more if you need it. Zoom calls are great for that. So if you do need to ask some questions, you can do that. Other than that, let me know if you need anything else, and then we'll go ahead and get started talking about continuous graphs.